Martin Amis is here. His new novel is called Lionel Asbo, State of England. It tells the story of a violent young thug who wins the lottery. Despite the fame and fortune, the internal question mark, like a rusty hook, snagged his innards. Amos has displayed a keen eye for social satire since his debut novel, The Rachel Papers. Almost 4 decades have passed since that book was published, but Amos, whom the New York Times once called fiction's angriest writer, has not mellowed. I am pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you, John.
You may not have mellowed, but you have done this. You have changed the place of your residency.
That's true.
Because?
It was all sort of personal stuff. We talked about it. My mother died 2 years ago, and we got to thinking, and my mother-in-law is about that age.
Right.
And also, Christopher Hitchens was still alive, and there was the prospect that he would have lived for another 5, 10, who knows, years.
Yeah.
So that was what brought
We
us
had
here.
talked about it, but for this audience may not have seen that conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me about Lionel Asbo and his friendship with Des.
Well, he's the worst character I've ever created, although I think far from the least likable. And Desmond, his nephew and ward, is the nicest character I've ever created. And I have mellowed. I've never risked sentimentality I've never come so close to it as with Desmond. But I was very fond of him, as I'm very fond of Lionel. Someone once said that the covers of a book are like the bars of a cage, and you could admire the tiger with his marvelous eyes and his bulk without feeling any danger. And literary monsters are very similar to that, in that we enjoy them without feeling threatened by them.
And how do you, what does Des think of Lionel?
He loves him. That's the trouble, and is very loyal to him. So because he's been in lieu of a father and a mother for him since the age of 12. So he helplessly loves him. The people you've known all your life, the power of your early feelings never leaves you. And both he and his wife have a figure in their lives, his wife's father, who is contemptible, but you can't help loving them, and that's the situation of Desmond with Lionel.
You have often written about the ambiguity between father and son.
Yes, but I wouldn't like to give any other impression than that I got on so well with my father that I was the envy of my friends, and it was a good father-son relationship, but it was also a literary friendship. So I think I benefited very much from it.
Can you make what is this? I hadn't thought about this much before, but I hope I haven't. The genetic idea of talent.
Well, it can't be true, that, because it wouldn't be such a rarity, the father and son. I'm not aware of any comparable mini dynasty.
Father-son, right.
In any language. So if it is inherited, then it
would be more apparent. And
it
more
would be
real
a little
more
bit
numerous.
More, yeah. There are examples of brothers, the Jameses and the Powerses, 3 brothers, all novelists. But the usual pattern, I think, is the David Updike version, where you write one book and that seems to satisfy your emulousness or whatever it is. And then the urge leaves you. But I always knew that I was in it for life, right from the start.
Because?
I don't know. I just... I have this theory that everyone's a writer when they're adolescent. They commune with themselves, as Desmond does in that book. They keep notes, diaries, write poems. And it's a marvelous coming of age with yourself. Self-awareness dawns. And 99% of the population move on from that, but writers never do.
What's the significance of winning the lottery?
It's meant to be utterly arbitrary. It's just one of the things that can happen in the modern world, and there's no reason why it should. And it's as arbitrary as the machine that picks out the winner. That it should happen to someone when they're
But
in
it can
prison.
be a life-changing catalyst.
Yeah, there's a whole population of lotto louts in England who have followed around from pub to
And what
pub.
happened to them?
I read a autobiography of one of them, a charming book called Careful What You Wish For, about someone who got through
Oh, these stories are amazing.
12 million
Yeah.
pounds on cocaine and girls and roller derbies in his back garden. And is now back to being a dustbin man, having spent it all. His biography ends rather sweetly by saying, my investments are all sorted out. My money is all in Dubai, he said.
Where he gambled it to death? Yeah.
But when I read the book, I thought it would be full of pointers for me. But I closed it with regret, thinking, I can't follow this story at all. I've got to go in another direction, not girls and parties. It'll have to be something.
Is there a debt to Dickens here?
Yeah, he was very much my looming larger than usual in my mind. And the extent of the debt didn't become clear to me until very late on. I mean, the verbal furniture of the book, the street names and so on, and some of the characters' names are taken from Dickens. But I realized I was writing this in the same genre as Dickens. Now, Dickens, everyone always knew Dickens was a great writer, but it wasn't established that he was a serious writer, because he's not a social realist like all the other great Victorians. He deals in a kind of magical fairy tale kind of world with parental mysteries, strange transformations, arbitrary rewards, huge punishments. And I realized my novel was like that too. It's sort of a fairy tale. It is social realist in a stylized kind of way, but it's more like a Disney cartoon than George Eliot Middlemarch.
And why State of England is the subtitle?
Well, my then 12-year-old daughter said, "Enough with the subtitles, Daddy, for crying out loud." She said,
it.
Yeah, with real passion.
Yes, stop it.
Because they do get you into sort of, it's a bit of a false lead. But there used to be such a thing as almost a genre of State of England novels. And they were very earnest and full of bureaucrats and academics talking in identical voices about the condition of various institutions in England. And mine is not that kind of novel at all. But it was just a salute.
So what is it about England that Lionel represents?
Well, what he represents, I suppose, is the fact that England takes him to its heart. He becomes a kind of national treasure,
Right.
Although it's all manipulative from his point of view. But he's what he represents, I suppose, is someone given enormous celebrity through no virtue of their own. And there is this echelon in England and elsewhere of people who are just, as they say, cornerly famous for being famous. But it
Yes, that's right.
but it does seem to the tabloid culture in England is much deeper than it is here. And your New York Post looks like Atlantic Monthly compared to the Sun and the Star and the Mirror. And
Now, did any of that make you want to leave?
No.
You don't care about that enough to...
No. No, that's a fantasy of journalists, is that they've driven you out of the country. But, no,
Would negative reviews drive you out of the country?
no.
You care about reviews?
I don't read them anymore, and I know that's often bull when writers say it, but the thing is, with all this doing publicity, is that book is gone, and you're on to the next one, and that's the one you're thinking about. And you don't want phrases jangling in your head that from reading reviews, because there's always something to irritate you, and you don't want to give it headroom, so you just stop reading them.
I want to talk just a little bit more about the book, but mainly talk about you. You're here, you're writing about the political conventions, you're writing about our political process, and you seem to find it distressing.
No, well, I mean, it's a marvelous spectacle. And the characters...
But should it be ennobling and rather than a spectacle?
It's getting worse.
Should it be a laboratory for democracy and all of that?
And what ideas thrashed out and so on.
Right.
Well, it hasn't been like that for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we have definitely come to a new low with this crop of Republicans who are... I went to an Occupy protest in Tampa, and amazingly tame it was, as if that fiery, hot, lefty passion has been completely bred out of American youth. It was. They had rappers there. They had a churchman speaking, but there was none of that fire. And this is an election that the Republicans are trying, in a pincer movement, to steal and buy at the same time, and talking a pack of lies whenever they make statements about policy. It's dishonest to the core, and I don't, in the 19th century there must have been.
We have something now in politics which is called fact-checking, and it's done by somebody other than journalists. They'll have somebody working for the paper who will do it. They're journalists, but they're not reporters. They're out writing about, their responsibility is to make assessments of whether people are telling the truth.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of that. I mean, it's amazing. And it's almost like people know that they're not telling the truth, but they believe they can get away with it.
That's
so
right.
Repeat it enough, it'll be the truth, which may go back to
there's no penalty for lying,
That's
say.
right. Or shame.
Or shame. And one of Romney's spokesmen said, we're not going to be dictated to by the fact checkers. Or put another way, we're not going to be dictated to by facts, by truth. Which is,
It's a great line that somebody said, you can change your opinion, but you can't change the facts.
Exactly. But the depth of cynicism, they're lying with a sneer because they think you're too stupid to understand. I think it'll kill them in November. If you lie enough,
They may very well, if you look at the polls today, lose the presidency, but maintain the House of Representatives and perhaps to narrow the margin or win the Senate.
Yeah, and then back to obstructionism or rejectionism, and nothing will be done. But
is that something that's just, it is so, the idea of dysfunction in Washington, the idea of gridlock in Washington, the idea of serious people not being able to get a deal done.
Yeah, but it's all the Republicans. A Democrat is used to making progress. It's a progressive party. What the Republicans won't compromise with Democrats, but will they compromise with reality?
Right.
That's the question. Because demographically they're doomed, and only 8% of them.
The components of their electoral support is on a decline, and the components of electoral support for Democrats, whether it's Hispanics or other minorities, is rising. So their numbers are rising, unless they can have a change of approach, so to make an appeal to those groups.
The Republicans?
Yes.
Well, they've got a long way to go.
Here's what you said, talking about age and everything else. What happens, it's already started happening to me, is that you turn 60 and there's this. This can't turn out well, but life grows in value because of your leave-taking with regard to it. Not very significant things suddenly look very poignant and charming. This particular period of my life is full of daily novelty that turned out to be worth a great deal.
Well, part of it is to do with
sunsets and things like that, or something else?
No, it's nauseatingly sentimental when you start to explain it. But when you arrive in the world, when you're young, you're saying hi to the world, and then after a certain point, you're saying bye to the world. And you come at things the other way, and it's in a leave-taking mode. And suddenly it all looks fresh and unbearably precious, and how terrible it will be to be parted from it. the death of Christopher Hitchens plays into this in an odd way, because a catastrophe that he died. But I felt, and I'm touching wood because I think I'm due a depression. But what happens is that your best friends, your peers and oldest friends, bequeath to you when they die their love of life. And his love of life was really intense. That's why he never went to bed. And I like to think that he died at the age of 70 because his days were 4 hours longer than ours. But it becomes your solemn duty to love life in the way they no longer can. And so this tends to make everything look precious.
In other words, he's imbued with the idea that you have to love life for him.
On his behalf, yeah.
And how do you do that?
There was no effort of will. It just, the world suddenly looked a better color, like being in love, while being, miserable in all sorts of ways, and giving out a yell of incredulity 4 or 5 times a day that he's not there. And yet, I'll probably have to pay a price for this, but they can't love life anymore, so you've got to do it for them. It's not very rational, but it seems to happen.
Of all the great things to happen to you, that friendship is high up on the list, is it?
Yeah, and I've been thinking about it a lot, clearly. And what marked out that friendship, and it's not true of any other friendship I have, is that we could say absolutely anything to each other, no matter how shameful and abject.
Or mean, or
anything. You didn't have to tailor it to him and to his presuppositions. And nearly every other friend, usually with friends, one is presenting a version of oneself. It's slightly, tightened, straightened. But with him, it was, utter relaxation from that point of view. It was the same with my father and Larkin. My father used to say, I can tell him anything,
The book is called Lionel Asbo, a novel. Subtitle, State of England, Arthur Martin Aim. It's always good to see you.
Always good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. See you next time.